Welcome back. For this tutorial, we're covering evaluating information. This is step 4 of the research process, reading and evaluating the information you've found to support your research question. Before you can evaluate sources, however, you have to be able to identify what you are looking at. Is it scholarly? Is it popular? We touched on this in the very first tutorial. How do you tell the difference? Scholarly articles contain the results of a research project. In a second, we'll discuss how to read a scholarly article. The topics are very focused and geared towards other researchers and professionals. They contain citations, bibliographies, or footnotes. The authors are subject experts, and the research is usually peer-reviewed, meaning other scholars have read it and think the research is sound. Popular articles contain general information, news, information about people or celebrities. The topics are geared towards the general public. You don't need to be an expert on the topic to read and understand the article. They don't contain citations or bibliographies, although sometimes they'll provide links to other sources. The authors are journalists, bloggers, etc. Articles are edited but not peer-reviewed, and there are usually lots of ads. When you read, it is important to look for the author's perspective and think about how that perspective reinforces, challenges, or contradicts the other articles or chapters you are reading. Reading and publishing is how scholars communicate. It's how they have an ongoing conversation about a topic or field of knowledge. By cherry-picking just a couple of articles, you are eavesdropping on conversations that may have been going on for years or decades. It's important as you become a scholar yourself here at IUPUI that you tap into that conversation, learn about your field, and hopefully contribute to the ongoing conversation. So, how do you read a scholarly paper? Different sections serve different purposes as part of an investigation. It's important to note that papers on scientific topics follow this outline more closely than articles in the humanities, but the elements are always there. Read the abstract first. It contains the main points. If there is no proper abstract, read the first couple of paragraphs of the article. Be sure to check the title of the article as well as the authors to make sure they seem credible. Tip: often authors will supply keywords, and you can use those to look for more sources. After you've read the article, skip to the end of the article and skim the conclusion. Tip: if this article is very relevant to your research question, look at their references to find more good sources. Once you've read the beginning and the end, you'll know if the article is related or relevant to your research question. At that point, you can read or skim the rest of the article to get all the details. While you read, you should consider how you know when information is good. Your decision whether to use a source should not be based on a snap judgment or a gut feeling, but rather through a thoughtful, scholarly approach. One way to think about a source is to evaluate it using who, what, where, when, why, and how with the guidance listed on the W131 course guide. For example, how did the author gather and analyze data to support their argument? Did they use an appropriate methodology for their question? If you're not sure, try to identify their methodology. Hint: look for a methods section and do a little research about the method itself. Perhaps use a background source to do this research. For example, one method is interviews. Interviews are not an appropriate method for gathering data about the effectiveness of a new drug. However, interviews would be an appropriate method for giving context to a riot. Credibility is created through many factors, and using the 5 W's and 1 H will give you a good basis from which to evaluate your article. Along with them, you should consider the logos, pathos, and ethos of the article. These 3 aspects of rhetoric also contribute to an author's credibility. Along with asking who the author is, think about their ethos. How did the author establish they were fit to discuss this topic? When considering why they wrote the piece you are evaluating, ask yourself if they exhibited pathos. Did the author appeal to the audience's emotions? How? Was it appropriate, or did it introduce a bias? And when asking how the author crafted their argument, consider the logos. What facts did the author choose to use, and how did they present them? If any of these aspects of credibility are missing or lacking, you should use your critical thinking skills to consider whether it's still appropriate to use the source. It's important to remember that there's no such thing as a bad source, only sources that are better or worse for your rhetorical situation and the level of evidence you need to support your claim. If you want to quickly confirm the members of the 90s boy band NSYNC, the Wikipedia article will do just fine. However, if you're trying to find sources that discuss the impact of climate change on Arctic wildlife, you'll probably want something more scholarly. What do you do if your articles aren't as great as you thought they were? When you see a great source that appears on a less than credible website, what can you do? Don't get blinded by the shininess of it. Take its ideas and look them up elsewhere to see if you can corroborate them. Does it cite sources? Find them. If there are no citations, is it a conspiracy theory? Don't be afraid to discard a source and look for something better. Knowing when to let a less than perfect source go is part of becoming a scholar. If you have questions or want help with this process, you can reach out to your instructor or subject librarian. Next, the fifth and last step of the research process, which includes citing your sources.